And thank you very much for the opportunity to present this evening. My name is Kaitlyn Mitchell, and I am a lawyer with Animal Justice, Canada's only national not-for-profit organization focused on using the law to protect animals. Animal Justice is based in Toronto, but I live here in Winnipeg. Now, a group of animal protection organizations has provided more detailed written comments to you. And due to the committee's rules, Animal Justice did not sign onto those comments, but I do commend those comments to you. They set out in a little bit more detail some of the concerns with the bill. So in the interest of time, I will focus my comments tonight on two overarching concerns with the bill. First is the prohibition on interacting with farmed animals. And second is the prohibition on giving farmed animals food and water. And we're concerned about this bill because, as you've already heard tonight, it is an example of an ag-gag law. These originated in the United States, and in the past year and a half, we've begun to see them cropping up in Canada as well. These laws are aimed in whole or in part at preventing individuals from observing, documenting, and publicly exposing the conditions in which farmed animals are raised, transported, or slaughtered. So as mentioned, the first overarching concern that I would like to discuss is that Bill 62 would create a new and incredibly broad offense of interacting with farmed animals. I'll focus my comments on section 13.2 sub 2, which applies to animals in transport, but 13.1 sub 3, which applies to animals in a biosecurity zone, is also troubling. Section 13.2 sub 2 is virtually identical to section 6.2 of Ontario's recently enacted ag-gag law. And in fact, it appears much broader, in fact, than Ontario's law. So like Ontario, it appears to be targeted at individuals who engage in peaceful protest activities on public property near slaughterhouses. It will capture a vast array of harmless activities, and without definition, it's hard to really even conceive of what it means to interact with an animal in transport. Does it include speaking to animals, making eye contact? What if you take their photograph? What if they nudge you or otherwise come into contact with you when you're near the truck? Professor Jody Lazar has already presented this evening on the potential unconstitutionality of Bill 62. I agree with her analysis and her conclusions, but rather than echoing her presentation, I will instead focus on the broader legal context in which Bill 62 is being introduced. Canada has some of the worst animal transport standards in the industrialized world. Cows and sheep can be legally transported up to 36 hours without food, water, or rest. Horses and pigs can be legally transported up to 28 hours without food, water, or rest. Animals are transported year-round during our extremely cold Manitoba winters and on balmy summer days. Canadian Food Inspection Agency, or CFIA data, shows that at federally inspected slaughterhouses alone, more than 1 million animals arrive dead each year, having died during transport. Nearly 9 million more are classified as condemned, meaning that due to conditions discovered before or after they're slaughtered, they cannot be consumed by humans. The reasons for an animal being classified this way would include bruising, frostbite, emaciation, and other conditions. So again, this data includes only federally regulated slaughterhouses. It does not include provincial slaughterhouses. So the numbers of animals dying in transport are actually much larger. Individuals protesting on public property near transport trucks raise awareness about these cruel conditions. And at times, these individuals are able to observe and document conditions inside trucks. As a lawyer, I am often contacted by individuals who have gathered footage showing conduct that appears to violate federal transport standards. I'm then able to use this footage and information to submit law enforcement complaints to the CFIA and provincial enforcement agencies. The footage that I'm forwarded, frankly, is often heartbreaking. It has included pigs dead in sweltering vehicles, while the are coming at the mouth and in clear distress, animals bleeding from open wounds, caught in crates in clear distress as they struggle to free themselves, and feather bear chickens with bright red skin exposed to freezing temperatures. Because the vast majority of animals raised and slaughtered for food spend their lives indoors on private property, it's only during transport that members of the public can generally see the animals and observe their treatment. Now, I want to be clear that prohibiting individuals from interacting with farmed animals and restricting peaceful protest activities outside of slaughterhouses does nothing to protect biosecurity. Animal Justice has reviewed CFIA records related to biosecurity incidents and disease outbreaks at Canadian farms going back nearly 20 years. This data shows not a single disease outbreak or biosecurity breach linked to the activities of animal protection advocates or protesters. All of the incidents were caused by farm owners and operators themselves, and they're caused by things like shared needles or equipment, workers entering multiple facilities, feeding animals other animals, as in the case of mad cow, back and forth between animals and workers, as Manitoba and Saskatchewan being quarantined, an H5N2 avian flu outbreak at a turkey breeding operation north of Winnipeg, and several outbreaks of porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. So I've provided you a brief to complement my presentation tonight, and that brief sets this out in a little more detail. So I'll leave that to committee members to review. But what I really want to say is that taking photographs or videos of animals in a transport truck does not pose a biosecurity risk. Peaceful protesters do not pose a risk to animals or food safety. The second main concern that I have is that sections 13.1 sub 3 and 13.2 sub 2 would make it an offense to give a farmed animal food or water. This is completely unnecessary. This is not a pressing issue. There are no groups of animal rights activists running around Manitoba looking for farmed animals to give food and water to. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and I struggle to understand why prohibiting giving food and water to animals is a priority at this or frankly any other time. Second, in the extremely rare instance where an individual does give a farmed animal food or water, they are not harming the animal, particularly when an animal is exhibiting signs of thirst, malnourishment, or heat exhaustion. Giving the animal food or water would in fact alleviate their suffering, and it should not be an offense. You've already heard that on rare occasions when individuals give an animal, such as a thirsty pig in a hot transport truck, when they give those animals water, those animals have nonetheless entered the food system and been slaughtered. So no harm has actually been caused to the food system either. Now, I expect some supporters of the bill may say it's necessary to make it an offense because, who knows what a person is really giving an animal, but this is not a convincing argument. It is already illegal to give a farmed animal a poisonous or injurious substance. If an individual were to do so, they would be violating the Animal Care Act and also the Criminal Code of Canada. Finally, the offense is plainly illogical and I would say excessively punitive. If Bill 62 is passed as is, it will result in severe penalties and even imprisonment for acts of compassion. It would mean that an individual in Manitoba who has a pig, either a pet or one they're raising for meat, if such an individual fails to provide the animal with adequate food and water, they leave the animal exposed to the elements, or even if they violently abuse that animal, they could go to jail for a maximum of 6 months, in addition to some $10,000 in fines. In contrast, a concerned citizen who gave that very same animal food or water could go to jail for up to a year, in addition to, again, $10,000 in fines. And I say to you that this is plainly unjust and illogical. So in conclusion, without significant amendment, Bill 62 would violate animal protection advocates' rights to expression and peaceful protest, as you've already heard. It will make it harder to document and expose the suffering of animals in transport, keeping consumers in the dark about where their food comes from, and silencing animal protection advocates under the guise of biosecurity. Regardless of one's views on the ethics of industrial animal agriculture, this should be deeply concerning to all Manitobans. In a free and democratic society, we have the right to engage in public debate and discussion on important issues like food safety. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. I look forward to answering your questions.